Hello!
Hey everyone! Experienced Wisdom here. Today we're going to talk about boundaries.
Our last episode, we spoke about our spiritual awakenings and how we developed a high sensitivity of empathy towards others. So now we are just going to speak of having healthy boundaries for ourselves, despite, having empathy for others.
So in relationships, in our family specifically, between us, we'll discuss those things too. Like the feeling of guilt that comes along with putting boundaries up, what we feel comfortable with sharing.
Learning to set healthy boundaries. Let's start with family. So with our experience with each other, there was a time that we crossed each other's boundaries, and we're always told that family comes first, and the stigma of family comes first and blood is first, and no matter what, you're there for, and we just kind of want to put light on how just because someone is your family, just because blood, and just because the way you're raised doesn't give family or anybody for that matter a right to cross your boundaries. You can still set healthy boundaries even with family, especially some people grow up in families that have this structure.
No, family was the hardest.
Yeah.
Boundaries to set.
And that's where we learn our first set of boundaries, how we treat each other in our families, what is blurred a lot of the time.
The way we were raised and the healthy boundaries that we set for each other at some point. I crossed at some point boundaries with my family, and it had to take them, because I wasn't respecting those boundaries, I had to take them pulling their energy back so that I understood. And a lot of times people will cross your boundaries unknowingly too. And it's up to us to be able to set those boundaries for ourselves. Sometimes people don't know unless you tell them. And
that was the case with us.
Right.
And I approached you for the very first time in my 30s, I think, to talk to you about boundaries, and that you had cross boundaries. But I think it was like years of boundaries being crossed, and I never said anything, and I never spoke up. So you wouldn't have known.
Right.
Until I told you.
Right.
And that was very uncomfortable. And I think that's important to note, is that with family, it can be especially hard to set boundaries, especially when you grow up in a unit like you were talking about, of, family is everything no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to kind of learn how to navigate that and understand that boundaries aren't only good for you, but the other person too.
Yeah.
It's like a learning on both sides. So yeah, when I approached you, that was really uncomfortable, but the way that you reacted, that made me feel like, okay, I can do that. I can set boundaries with her because she's allowing me to do that. So
yes, I remember when, you approached me, and I was like, what's wrong? Like, I was so confused. I didn't say that, but I was just more like looking at her like, what's going on? Because I could tell that she was having a hard time. And so then she told me, and when you do establish those healthy boundaries, and others, whether they're going to respect them or not, is obviously not your fault. Healthy boundaries has to do with both parties involved. So the other person that you're setting boundaries with also have to be self-aware and take responsibility for their part in it. And I think that's really hard.
Yeah, and I think setting boundaries is a way of saying that I love you enough to continue having a relationship, but I just need this type of space, or this is what I need from you in this relationship. And whereas if you don't set those boundaries and you're just kind of like, that's, you go into like ghosting, or you just cut people out of your life because you just don't want to deal with it. But, I think that says a lot when you are confronted with somebody who's putting boundaries on you, because then you start to feel like, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? Am I like such a horrible person? So I think that you're so understanding that you understood that, like, okay, like, we're family, we're sisters, we're gonna work through this. And
Yeah,
that
like I
says a
care
lot.
about our relationship to hear you out. And not only, and by hearing you out, also saying, oh my, you know, like
Respecting.
I feel awful for, you know, my part in crossing your boundaries. And I'm really glad that you brought this to my attention, because then I would not have known otherwise what I was doing wrong. And taking full responsibility is a huge thing. And you know, if anybody tries to set their boundaries with you, just know that they do it because they care for you, because they want you a part of their lives, not because they pull their energy back after setting the boundaries because you're not respecting it. And us pulling our energy back within each other wasn't to hurt each other, wasn't because we wanted to give each other silent treatment or anything. It was because we care enough to be like, obviously you're not respecting how I'm feeling at this time, so right now the best thing I can do for myself is just pull my energy back and then come back to it, if so, again, you know, to talk until both parties are able to be self-aware, to be like, oh, and take responsibility for each part. That's very important. You can set your boundaries with other people, that doesn't mean they're going to respect them, you know.
You have no control over that.
And yeah,
Right. And you have to know with who too. Like, do you feel heard with them? Are your feelings being validated when you do put those boundaries up? Or do you feel safe sharing certain things with them? You also have to have that,
Like that self-awareness.
yeah, that self-awareness to know who you're speaking to as well. With kids, it could be a little bit different, where you have to be more consistent showing them, I don't like this, I don't like, you know. And then with adults, it's kind of the same thing, but you know, you have to understand if they continue and it's just like a little cycle with them, then that's when you know, okay, I have to
pull my energy back.
pull back.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and I think as you change and you grow throughout your life, your boundaries start to change. So you know, with each person, and you learn so much when you do set boundaries with someone by the way that they react to your boundaries.
So if you feel like your boundaries are being crossed, make that known. Whether it's facial expressions, like we know each other so well through that. Like if I were to say something, like sometimes I put my foot in my mouth, you know, my sister will give me a reaction. Like hers is the look.
I can't hide it.
Yeah, hers is the look. And I'll be like, oh gosh, I'm sorry for being insensitive at that time. Because
and
sometimes we just don't know. Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, what do you mean by that then? Or what are you trying to...
And that's another healthy way to do it, is by asking those questions. Because again, how would anybody know they're crossing boundaries unless you, you know, you make that known? And that goes for the same with every relationship. Like what you allow will continue, because the other person, I mean, unless they're disrespecting your boundaries and they continue crossing your boundaries, then that's another story. That, I mean, if that happens, it's best to just pull your energy back, because you're not being heard and you're not being respected. So it's not that you're trying to be, you know, I'm just trying to pull my energy back and ignore you, because setting those healthy boundaries, and it takes two for the other person also to be aware of what they're doing. So pulling your energy back is a huge, good, healthy boundary that you can do for yourself. Because unless you're just pulling your energy back and not letting people know what your boundaries are, then that's another story. That becomes ghosting and becomes silent treatment.
Being avoidant and, you know, not wanting to confront what the actual issue is.
Right. And communication is so important. I cannot iterate that enough, you know.
Especially verbalizing. Because I was going to say, some people cannot pick up social cues like facial feedback or like body language. And so verbalizing it is going to be really important.
And being assertive. It's not like you need to shout at somebody and be like, you are disrespecting. Like, just be assertive and say, hey, I feel like this is A, B, and C. And be assertive of it. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to, you know, just be verbal, like Amy said, and make it known, you know. And if they continue to cross it, then again, that's out of your hands, you know.
And I think that too, guilt comes in a lot because, you know, how you grew up has a huge impact on the way that you deal with, you know, certain things. So when you know, being like confronting people or confrontational to others is different for everybody. So I know for me that was the hardest thing that I had to learn, is not to feel guilty for putting up those boundaries, because I didn't want that person to think that, you know, I was pushing them away, or, you know, that I just didn't want anything to do with them, or, you know, but that was just my guilt of I I don't want to make people feel bad. And but then again, it would continue, where the cycle would be, okay, now my boundaries are being crossed again because I let certain things go because I feel guilty, or I'm ashamed that I have to do that, or have to have that conversation with them. And it's hard, and it's understandable because, you know, when you grow up in a family who's super knit tight, or how do you say
Tight knit.
tight knit, you just have that, like, everybody, this is what we do, this is how we deal with things. And a lot of families just kind of push your feelings aside and you just deal with it, or, you know, you don't actually talk about what the real issue is. It's just the overall feeling. And, you know, so then you have sibling rivalry, and, you know, like, you just start to feel envious of other, you know, people in your family and stuff like that. But in reality, it's because we're not putting up the correct boundaries of what we want, you know.
And putting, there's a difference also, because then family members, because they didn't set those boundaries, they end up just giving each other the silent treatment because they don't communicate, and then that becomes unhealthy boundaries, you know, just sweeping things underneath the rug instead of facing what it is that someone did to cross your boundaries, you know.
And it certainly brings up so much resentment over the years if you say nothing. You know, if you don't set your boundaries with that person, then you just, and that's only hurting you because they don't even know. You know, they don't even know that they're you know, crossing boundaries. But
and like from my experience with boundaries, like I never set them because I was never taught them. So I didn't know what healthy boundaries were. And in my experience, with not wanting to, which correlates into, I was like a people pleaser, I was all of that, and I always felt bad, you know, for establishing my boundaries with other people, because I always wanted to make people happy. And me doing, like, setting boundaries, I would feel bad for the person. But you need to think of it differently now. Don't think of it, I'm not going to do this or that because it might hurt this person. Think of it, how do I feel? How does this person make me feel? You know, obviously you're not going to be rude to somebody. You're going to hopefully know enough not to, you know, but also just like asking yourself those questions. Why am I allowing this? So what their behavior is making me feel awful. And it's like, is it because I'm allowing it? You like ask yourself those questions. Think of how you're feeling too. We oftentimes, like, my people pleasing was always pleasing the other person, always, you know, saying how the other person must feel of my actions. But don't only do that, also do how they're crossing your boundaries too. And I understand, like, so many people do not know how to establish those boundaries because they feel bad. And that was my thing, was always feeling bad, always wanting them to be happy, wanting others to be happy. But what about yourself? What about what you want for yourself?
And I would say that a good way to know when you need to set boundaries with someone is to pay attention to how you feel or how you react to what they've said or done. So, like, if you say something to me and I'm like, oh, I don't know, that kind of made me feel uncomfortable, or that kind of made me feel a certain way. Well, that's a good opportunity then for you to set a boundary with that person.
Great way.
I think boundaries as a parent, that's kind of hard, especially as a mom, because you have to live up to this idea as a mom that, like, you're supposed to give up everything for your kids. So when it comes to boundaries around time and like self-care, that can be really difficult. So like sometimes my kids want to do this and that and be, you know, all over the place, but I've worked all week or I've worked the whole day and then I have schoolwork and I'm just exhausted. And I think sometimes saying like, no, I don't feel like doing that, then you start to feel, like you said, Adriana, the guilt, right? The mom guilt. So I think it's really important for parents to know that it's okay to set boundaries and with time and your children. Like it's okay to do that. Like you cannot pour from an empty cup, like they say. Right. Your cup needs to be full too. And so setting those boundaries around time, that's really important.
And with friends too, it's, you know, I've had to make a lot of changes and do a lot of different things with that. I think just voicing, I think that if they care enough, they'll just understand that, you know, I go from wanting to always be with somebody, hanging out, doing so many things, to being, I just need a day to just do nothing, you know? So I think knowing, hey, today I just need to chill. I just need to relax. I just need me time or whatever. I need to catch up on a lot of things, and just being respectful of their space too. So
And just being respectful to yourself first and foremost, because we tend to really overlook ourselves a lot because we, like, again, the guilt and the shame and you know, feeling bad, you know. And I get it, setting boundaries is not easy. Like now, well, piece of cake for me now because I've had to do it, you know, enough to get used to it, but it was hard. It was so hard for me to get used to setting boundaries. Like I didn't realize how much I allowed people to cross my boundaries until I was more self-aware myself, and I was like, hey, oh my gosh, I do not feel good around this person. This person is doing so and so to me, and I'm allowing it, you know. Just keep in mind that allowing people to do certain things that cross the way you feel is gonna keep continuing until you address it, you know. Protect yourself, protect your energy, protect who you are as a person, and stick up for yourself. Family, friends, relationships, it doesn't matter. You know, do that for yourself. That's the best thing you can do for yourself, because it's just going to keep draining your energy, keep depleting who you are, and that's not fair to allow that. And love yourself enough to be like, hey, you know, I matter too, you know, not just everyone else around me. I matter too, and show people.
Because it'll be a reflection of the way that you treat yourself, you know?
Yeah. All right, and thank you guys so much for, you know, listening to us today. We appreciate all the support, all the views, everybody that's, you know, reached out to us and has given us feedback and has, you know, have been giving us support, everything. So we truly appreciate it, and we look forward to continuing doing more videos. And thank you.
Bye.
See ya.
See ya.